make you so special? Why did he bless you? Think about it. I woke up this morning. Got a smile when I say that shit. I woke up this morning. Go.
Well, we are live. We're live with Joel Geders.
Woo!
Oh yeah. This dude. Well, we've actually been talking for it's been an hour and 40 minutes. I looked at the times.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I know. We've just been sitting around talking before the pod for a while now, so it feels like we've been live for a while, just hanging out. Well, dude, you're a lethal weapon.
I wouldn't go quite that far, but I do have some ninja skills.
Yep. Well, yeah, I mean, any role that you put me on my ass in probably a minute, and.
I mean, but you also have to remember, if you add in how much time I've been wrestling, I've been doing martial arts 12 years now, since I was 14.
Right.
So I would hope to God.
True.
Not being a dick or anything, but just
no, not at all.
But that's my thing when some people are like, "Damn, you do that quickly." I'm like, yeah, but at the same time, some people take it personally, and I'm just like, I've been doing not this, but I've been training as long as our head coach almost.
Yeah, exactly.
I would hope to God I can deal with people.
And I was making that claim to add credibility to it. Versus, because you're totally right. If I took that personal myself, I'm comparing myself to a beginner who's I've only done 2 months of jiu-jitsu versus somebody who's been doing it for. Well, how long have you been doing jiu-jitsu for? Because you wrestled before, then started jiu-jitsu, right?
So I wrestled for I think 9 or 10 years, and then I started doing jiu-jitsu 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you prefer?
I don't think I really prefer either. I don't have a preference on any martial art, honestly.
Just perks to each one kind of deal?
Yeah, okay, if you follow the super traditional schools of certain martial arts, yeah, I would say I like the philosophy of jiu-jitsu a lot, but at the same time, part of what, and a lot of that has to do with jiu-jitsu. There's competition, it's competitive and everything, but overall, the mindset is a lot more relaxed. It's about flowing, being smooth. In wrestling, you are taught to explode, throw, you are taught to be, you're basically trained to be a savage.
Okay.
You can't finish that takedown. This guy is stuffing your hips. You aren't driving it hard enough. You might also have the technique wrong, but at the same time, there's a guy who, part of, I guess my first introduction to jiu-jitsu at all was this guy named Dakota, who my, senior year of college wrestling, he joined the team just to, try it out. Because he'd done jiu-jitsu before, and he talked with our coach. He'd wanted to learn some wrestling, and I don't think he was quite ready for it because physically ready for it, because I don't think he understood the difference. Because he mentioned to me one time, he's jiu-jitsu, it's a lot more technical, but wrestlers are just so fucking strong.
Right. Okay.
Well, and that's the thing is you're trained to do everything very powerfully.
Okay.
Part of that is through leverage and technique, same as jiu-jitsu. But in wrestling training, there would be a whole hour of practice that was devoted to lifting and conditioning.
Right. Okay.
In jiu-jitsu, depending on what academy you go to, a lot of times you end up really doing most of that on your own. In wrestling, it was no, you're going to be here, and you're going to do this.
So does weight class matter more in wrestling then?
I would say yes.
Okay.
It's really hard to say what, because, okay, in a wrestling tournament, in jiu-jitsu, they do absolute tournaments, which is basically depending on what tournament, either the champions or top 3 from each individual weight class all go into a bracket.
Right.
In wrestling, they don't do that.
Okay.
And part of the reason is, like, I think twofold. One is, like, wrestling tournaments are a bit more brutal in my mind sometimes. Like, you could not get through a day of a wrestling tournament and then, like, go do a whole nother bracket. It would be, well, you could, but it would be really hard. Like, really hard.
Just strenuous on the body? Or?
Yeah, well, especially, like, collegiate or anything above level wrestling, it's so high-paced.
Really?
Like, when you're locking up collar ties on the guys, you're basically punching them in the back of the head with your forearm. It's not like you're just... Like, it is a brutal sport. You will come out of matches with black eyes and, like, most of the skin on your forehead rubbed out.
Wow.
Like, it's a whole different animal. Like, that's, I think, the biggest difference for me competitively, wrestling versus jiu-jitsu, is wrestling is a lot more of a vicious sport. Wrestling in terms of, like, the mindset, like... basically the dog with a bloody mouth mindset. That's a lot more MMA, a lot more wrestling of a mindset. Like,
okay.
Jiu-jitsu is a bit more relaxed.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Like, I even remember in my first MMA fight, Mop made a point to mention to me, he's like, you gotta go faster pace. This isn't like Jiu-jitsu. High pace, high volume, high intensity. Like...
For MMA?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and, like, Jiu-jitsu... You can kind of take your time and work through the positions. A lot harder to do in wrestling. But I mean, at the same time, I don't think one is better than the other.
I've always been curious about that.
Wrestling taught me how to tough out shit that I really don't want to, more than anything I've ever gone through in my life.
Really?
Like, I remember one time in college for, like, our coach was like, all right, we're doing this community service project. We literally were like, they were clearing a path for a local state park. We were hauling fucking full trees. Like, individually, we were hauling full trees, like, out of the fucking woods.
Oh, what?
When it was really fun, because, like, but the thing is, think about this. We trained so much and so fucking hard, that actually felt like a rest day to us.
Oh, I believe it.
Like,
I really believe that.
And there were other people there helping to volunteer, like 20 or 30 of them. They were hauling, like, they were pulling up, like, branches, bundles of sticks. Literally, were pulling out whole trees.
That's crazy. like full-grown trees.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, and because our coach was like, save the wood. I want it for kindling. Well, and, like... I mean, so, yeah, that was, and like I said, that was like, he considered that giving us the day off.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like, that's
like,
a different type of athlete. I like it.
Like, my first day of college wrestling practice, like, this was just, we were just doing a lifting session. So, we're getting through the lift, everyone's about done, and I still don't, he'd been bitching at some of us for talking during lifting too much. And like, knowing my coach, okay, maybe the guy that he got pissed at us all over was talking a lot, but at the same time, he just wanted an excuse to make us work more. We're literally almost done with this lift, and he's like, all right. And this guy's name was Helmut, like the German name Helmut.
Helmut?
Helmut.
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 Okay.
He went by Alec. He's actually a really nice guy, a really great guy. I worked a lot with him, learned a lot with him, grew a lot with him over the course of wrestling. But, yeah, unfortunate family name for being a guy, because, you know, we give each other massive amounts of shit for anything we can think of.
Right.
But, yeah.
Especially being within a team.
Oh, God. But anyway, so, like, our coach just yells at this guy. He's like, all right, that's it. Helmut was fucking talking too much, so now everyone get a fucking plate weight. So he had us all, and this was on a 98-degree day, grab a 45-pound plate, except for Helmut, and he's like, except for you, Helmut, grab the 100-fucking-pounder, because we had 200-pound plates, and he had to carry one. So he made us run a mile carrying these plates right after, like, pretty much finishing a collegiate wrestling lift. And
dude,
then
I bet that would be just straight shin splints, like, immediately. Wow.
You think he gave a shit?
Yeah, true.
Like that's the thing. Is like that's the mindset of wrestling. Is like you know, like if you had said something to him like, "Oh, coach, this hurts," he'd just be like, "Good." Like that's the mindset of wrestling. Is
kind of like we were talking about earlier with the Russians. Just that mentality. Just fight through it. Don't complain about it.
That's why Russians are really good at wrestling and fighting, man. Like. That's why some of the best wrestlers in the world, some of the best fighters in the world, still to this day come out of Russia, and it's been that way for hundreds of years.
It's going to continue to be that way.
Like, for real.
But they also just, like, biologically seem bigger over there.
Well, that also has to do with the fact that they have one of the most developed doping programs in the world. They had an agency whose entire job was to, like, basically keep the World Anti-Doping Association from testing their athletes positive.
No way.
No, yeah, like the Russians...
Just to prevent that from happening, really?
Yeah, well, not to prevent them from to be clear, not to prevent them from testing, but from testing positive.
Okay.
Like the Russian like their national athletics is like an actual government ministry. Like, you know, like our Olympic athletes are like government run programs, but like maybe I'm wrong on this, but we don't have a guy that's like specifically like, you know, Minister of Olympics, a Minister of International Sports.
Right.
Like, you know, the programs are all a little bit more like, but they actually have like a minister for sports, and they had an actual doping, like, you know, their anti-doping agencies, they had a doping agency. Yeah. Unlike, it was this
just to counteract, just so their athletes are pretty much performing an optimal performance on an...
Constantly.
Wow. Deceptive.
Yes. Very
elaborately deceptive, though.
Very much so. Like, they had, like... And this wasn't like a bullshit, like, like, they had some of their best PhD, like, doctors, PhDs, everything, working to make this happen.
What's the motive? Profit? Or just winning?
Winning.
Pride? Okay.
Russian, like... I don't, like... That's the thing, like, when I was telling you about earlier, like... Why, despite the fact that the Russian army would literally send out their soldiers with sticks, why people did not like fighting them, is like, think about the balls it takes, even if you're being told to charge at someone who's shooting at you with a stick.
I couldn't even imagine that mindset, because anybody I know would just say no, like, I'm gonna die from this. You know what I mean? They would question it too much.
Well, in the Russians, it's not that they didn't question it, like, they're just like... It's almost just like in their blood to fight tooth and nail.
Okay.
Like, there's this one, like, famous...
Sounds like a Spartan mentality.
Pretty much, like, they're just like... And, I mean, also, to a certain degree, this had to do with their commanders just not giving a flying fuck.
Right.
But, like, their mindset is, like... I remember one time, it was in the office of my dentist... And there was this one picture, and I thought it was just some random picture. And then this old guy was wearing like a World War II like vet, or no, he wasn't wearing a hat or anything. But like, he's just like, oh, they got that wrong on that picture. And I'm like, how do you know? He's like, because I've been to that bridge. And it turned out he had been a World War II veteran that was active like in Europe, in like Central Europe during the Battle of the Bulge. And at one point, like,
so this is World War II?
Yes.
Okay.
And the Battle of the Bulge was basically like, that was the final German attack. Okay. That like it was a massive attempt at an offensive by Germany, and they were trying to push out their territory. And I can't remember where exactly it was, but why it's called the Battle of the Bulge is basically they start like. Their border is like drawn here. They started pushing out and formed this pocket of expanded territory. And this guy though that I was talking to, he said that, like, during the Bulge, like, we ended up like just kind of while we were driving around towns, like, we found this one Russian guy that had just gotten stranded from the Russian army. Now, whether or not he was stranded or a deserter is another thing, because due to the fact that they would send you out with sticks, desertion was common in the Russian army.
Right.
Like, but, like, he would say, like, I remember one time when we, like, found these two Nazi guys. He just walked up to them, picked them up by their skulls, and clunked them together.
Like, he didn't have any guns or anything, so that's what he...
Well, no, he just, like... Well, I mean, at that point, they gave him a gun because he was traveling with them.
Okay.
But look, I don't know if he had a gun, but I'm assuming at that point, if he was traveling with them, they probably gave him some kind of gun.
What a badass, dude.
But yeah, dude, he just picks up these two Nazis, clunks his skull together. He's just, and this old guy's telling me, he's like, that Russian's the toughest son of a bitch I ever met. Like, it's just in their culture, man.
Right. That's insane.
Yeah, dude.
But that's weird because whenever I think of German people, I always think of their men being like massive as well.
Russians have the fight tenacity of Germans without necessarily the logical limits behind it. Like, German generals would never use the tactic of like, let's send wave after wave after wave, and eventually they're going to quit. Because, like, they're just like, oh, we've got to save our troops for, like...
They're going to think more long-term.
Well, not even... It's not even long-term. It's just the fact that, like... Germans are very logical people. They're, like... Okay, a good example I like to give of people of what German society is like and how I'd compare it with, like... So, when I was in college, I spent a semester in Florence... And Florence is like basically central, kind of like beginnings of northern Italy. Okay. But in Florence, and pretty much throughout Italy, except for the far north where they basically consider the people they're Germans, you are at a crosswalk, people are probably going to be crossing the street somewhere else. Like, Italians just cross the street.
A lot of jaywalking. Less structure.
Yeah, a lot of jaywalking, and, like, say the, like, sign is up for, like, don't walk. They don't give a shit. Like, they'll just go. Like, if the coast is clear, they go. Right. It doesn't matter if there's a crosswalk, if the sign is up for them to walk, whatever. In Germany, I was standing at a crosswalk. Not one person, not one, would go before the light turned.
Really?
Not one.
It's those little things that you pick up on, those little cues. That's crazy.
Yeah, like the Germans have a very like almost self-imposed kind of like. It's really weird. Like, I don't even know how to put it, but it like I said, it's a very like they're very logical people. The Russians are fucking crazy, and I mean that in like a good way, but like. The Russians are just fucking nuts. They will do whatever. Like, that's...
Maybe ruthless. Just
fearless. I wouldn't even say, like... Well, okay, yeah, if you get on the wrong side of them, yeah, ruthless, like... Whatever adjective you want to pick, they're basically the honey badger of the, like, nations of people in my mind.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Honey badger is an animal that's about the size of like 4 of one of your little dogs. Uh-huh. Like maybe they top out at like 30 to 40 pounds.
Right.
For snacks, they will eat lethally venomous snakes and live beehives.
Wow.
There's like video of them just like...
Oh, I've seen that because
they walk up to groups of lions and just start fighting them.
Really?
Like they will walk if like when
there's a video of some guy commentating on YouTube. He's like, honey badgers don't give a fuck. They don't care. They don't give a fuck.
Well, and like this like that's a video like why people know like have heard the honey badger, and that's the like that guy is like not kidding. Like it's a really funny video, but like there's some like. So, crazy anatomical thing I love about the honey badger and why it can, like, fight lions, because, like, you'll see, like, in videos where, like, the lion will fucking bite its neck, and you'll just be like, how is that thing still alive? But the crazy thing is, so, like, our skin, like, I can't really wiggle my arm around inside of my skin, or any part of my body, really. Okay. The honey badger's skin is pretty much attached to their body only at one point. So, to a large degree, like, they can fully rotate their body inside their own, like, from within their own skin.
It's almost like a shell at that point.
Well, on top of that, their fur is so thick that, like, it's basically like trying to bite through Kevlar. Like, just a super tightly woven material.
Okay.
Or, like, yeah.
Reminds me, like, almost like a cloak. Like a very...
Yeah.
Strong, kind of a valuable cloak.
Yeah, their skin, like... their fur is basically like so matted and thick it's hard to bite through. Their skin is like leather. They can move around within their skin, so even if you bite through their fur and their skin, you're not necessarily even going to hit a vital organ.
Well, what if you're shooting it with like a high-powered like bow and arrow?
I mean, at that point, like, okay, yeah.
Okay, you're talking teeth, though. Okay.
But yeah, like if you spear the thing, it's probably going to be pretty damn hurt.
I'm pushing the limits. Yeah.
I mean, like, no, I get what you're saying, but like, I mean, in terms of like natural defense, like, they are able to fight animals that humans don't have the natural tools to, like I said, like, they eat venomous snakes, and it's not like the venom doesn't affect them. Like, they just have developed such strong processing systems for the venom. Basically what they'll do, like, when they eat a really lethally venomous snake, is they'll nap for, like, a couple hours. And then they're fine. And it's, like, it doesn't hurt them. They just rest, process the venom, and they're good.
But it just takes a little nap.
Yeah.
Wow.
And like, okay, like how I said they eat live bee, they like snack on live beehives, how they can do it, because you got to think like, there can be thousands of bees in a hive, and when you crawl into a hive, they will all attack you. They will all, because like...
That interdependent thinking, man, it's like, attack this predator, attack the invader.
It'll just sit there because they can't sting through its fur.
Protect the motherland!
Like, for real. Very real. And
wow.
But the thing is, like, they can't sting through its fur, so it just eats it either eats the whole damn thing or just it'll eat until it's done.
All these little kamikaze bees are coming in, flying in, attacking. That'd be frustrating.
Well, like even though like there's some that can sting through it, it doesn't even really feel it.
Why is that?
Just because of the way its skin is designed, it's so leathery, like.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I guess if they break through, they're not breaking through 100%.
They're not.
In theory.
They're not really breaking through that deep. There aren't, like, it doesn't affect their nervous system the same. They are a wonder of anatomy in terms of natural defenses.
Okay.
And also, just, like, the other thing I love about honey badgers is that they are one of, like, they don't really care. There, in the animal kingdom, there is like literally, there are a few things they will truly run away from. If they feel like they have to fight a pack of hyenas, they will fight a pack of hyenas.
Wow.
Like, and there are videos of like online, like.
What about like a gorilla?
Like, if they are threatened, like until they are damn near life, like, unless they're about to die, a honey badger usually won't run away from a fight. Like if you see a honey badger running away, it's probably like. Okay, a couple more. It's not like, oh, I'm hurt pretty bad. It's like, oh, I'm gonna die if I take a lot more of this.
Right.
Like, it's a very insane animal.
That's crazy that the fight or flight is so different compared to us.
Well, because, like, you have to realize, like, they live in a land of lions and hyenas. Like, they have to be. It's the way they have to be. It's kind of like how Russians live in a land, like, Russia is one of the coldest places on Earth. Like, even the southern parts of Russia are not exactly warm, you know?
Right.
Like, so, and, like, think about it, a nation of people that, like, so many people have tried to invade Russia. So many people have tried to invade Russia. It has been the downfall of, like, two of the most powerful emperors in modern world history. Napoleon. Okay, it has been the downfall of Napoleon, freaking Kaiser Wilhelm, the one that was the leader of Germany during World War I, and Hitler. Literally, like, there are, like, so many military endeavors, like wars, just general expansion plans, have ended with, I'm gonna go invade Russia, and it doesn't work. Right,
because that's really where Hitler fucked up. Like,
yes,
like everybody likes to say, like, what's the famous Hitler quote? Like, whenever the Japanese bombed us on Pearl Harbor Day, Hitler said something like, before he did it, he said something like, "Don't awake the sleeping beast," referring to America. But, like, where he really messed up was trying to invade Russia. And wasn't it the climate that played such a role then?
Well, it's always what's played such a role, because Russia has pretty much always used the same tactic. Like, and I mean, they used the same tactic with Napoleon, Kaiser Wilhelm, and Hitler, which is, as soon as they start advancing, fight enough battles to keep pulling them into your territory, but as you go, burn everything behind you. As you give up ground, don't leave anything behind for them to take.
Any resources they could possibly use.
They destroyed.
Really? Okay.
Like, Russia basically went scorched earth policy on itself. Well, and what they would do, because they had so much land area, it's not like large influxes of people would really mess with things. It's not like they had nowhere to go.
Right.
Because, like...
even though it is finite, there's so much of it, it doesn't really matter.
Like Russia, way more than almost any other country, could afford to give up land.
Right, true.
Like, and especially European countries, because Russia, at the time, was about the size of Europe. So, you know...
no more, honestly.
Yeah, so, I mean, like... And this can be said of all three of those people. So pick one, and probably several other. Well, not probably, definitely several other people I'm forgetting about. But like, what they do? So they fight. Like I said, they fight little battles, keep pulling you into the territory, destroy everything you could take out of that territory, and then they leave. They basically leave like sniper and friggin' like you know. Like raid groups behind
to just slowly take them off, pick them off. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And by the time they and basically they would do it in such a pace that by the time, like, they would get really deep into Russia, and then the winter would hit.
Right.
And that's when everything changes, because up until then, the soldiers are fighting on fairly equal terms, because Napoleon's army, the German army, either time, a much more like calculated, precise, tactical army that has better technological equipment, but they're not used to fighting in fucking frigid cold temperatures.
Exactly.
Their technology isn't designed to work in the freezing cold.
Well, their uniforms probably aren't for that either.
No, like Hitler's army didn't bring winter uniforms. Neither did Napoleon's, and I'm almost damn sure probably Kaiser Wilhelm's didn't either.
Wow.
But what their concept of what the Russian winter was, because this was a time before you could like look up temperatures really.
Right.
Like you had
even World War II.
Even World War II, man.
But with World War II, there are so many traces of that truth and that failure that everybody failed to conquer because of this, and Hitler didn't take that into consideration whatsoever.
Well, I mean, if you want to think about it, Hitler didn't take a lot of things into consideration. The Germans were winning World War I handedly up until they decided to open the Russian front.
Wait, you're saying World War II?
Well, no, World War I. The Russians,
World War I, really?
They did the exact same thing in both World Wars. They were actually winning the war in the West, and they started a two-front war. And there's actually
greed.
Not even. I don't know if it's even greed as much as just pride, like being overly proud, like because the basic foundational plan for the start of German World War I was founded in this thing called the Schlieffen Plan.
Okay.
And it was a strategy to go through, I think it was a certain part of Belgium or northern France, invade France, take over that section of Western Europe through a more series of calculated conquests. Then, after all of that, you invade Russia. But one of the biggest tenets of the Schlieffen Plan, and this was named after the German general that came up with it. This was like the 1890s, I believe, maybe early 1900s. Had to be before like 1913.
Okay.
But the other big tenet was don't invade Russia first. Don't start a two-front war, because then that will tax resources too much. You'll be split between fronts, and it will turn into either a war of attrition that no one wins or an unwinnable war of attrition. They did that. In World War I, what they did is they went with a modified version of the Schleifeland plan that took them through a more fortified portion of Belgium, which is why actually France didn't get conquered in the German Blitzkrieg of Paris. Because in World War One, basically if they had followed the initial Schleifeland plan, World War One, at least France probably would have completely lost to the Germans.
Okay.
But like the biggest thing is, so first off, in World War One, what kind of fucked them from the start is they deviated from their initial plan, and exactly the result that was predicted to be problematic happened. First off, they went through too fortified or too distant of a region of Belgium, gave the French time to respond, that allowed them to basically, it was a couple hours and a bunch of cab drivers is the reason Paris didn't get taken by the Germans in 1913 or 14, whatever.
Really?
Really?
What to those variables?
Yes.
Cab drivers and what else?
Cab drivers and the Germans taking a different plan that deviated from their initial plan to invade France.
Wow.
Well, because what ended up happening, because the French army wasn't like really fully assembled, so they were like what I say, cab drivers. Basically, cab drivers were just hauling ass all over the countryside, driving in soldiers into Paris for the attack.
Today that'd be Ubers.
Like, but I mean, think about it. Like,
Ubers are winning us a war. That's great.
France was saved in World War One by Uber drivers. Think about that. But like, so go forward to World War Two, and the Germans do the exact same thing.
Same mistake.
Like, they fixed one thing. They effectively broke through France. But the problem is they didn't fix the second problem, which was starting a two-front war before you would fully finish the war in the West.
Well, it sounds like they started that problem themselves.
They did.
By starting a two-front war. What do you mean by fixing it then?
Well, no, what I'm saying is like the two of the biggest problems that happened in World War One with the Germans was they deviated from their initial invasion plan of France, which ended up giving the French more time to respond. And
Okay.
It's debated that like those couple hours are what saved them. And then on top of that, they started, while they were still struggling in the Western Front with France, England, etc., they started a war with Russia. And that was kind of like very, very long and drawn outly, but that was like their nail in the coffin in terms of what really led to them not being able to keep up.
Right.
And in World War II, so the initial Blitzkrieg, the invasion of France, and subsequently the rest of Europe went very well. But they started a two-front war before they finished the other one.
Yeah, strategically speaking, that just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, yeah.
Like conquer over here and then take it. If you want to conquer Russia so bad, do it after you finish this over here.
Well, and so like one of the biggest things that then also came into play was like they literally, like I was saying, like they weren't ready for the cold. Their technology wasn't ready for the cold. So like
Other soldiers.
Yeah. So like think one of the big German guns used at the time, a major German submachine gun, was this thing called the grease gun. Okay. It's called the grease gun because you had to keep it really well lubricated to fire, and like you've probably seen it in movies. It's like the stereotypical Nazi submachine gun.
Okay.
Problem in colder temperatures, grease would freeze. The AK-47, one of the and this was the period of time at which the AK-47 had been invented, and certainly
during World War II.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
You can look it up. Actually, look that up. You should look that up. But, okay. Basically, though, the Russians,
1949, so it was a little bit after World War II.
Okay, but, the thing about Russian weapons and, why I brought up the AK and this is, it's the best example of this design is, Russians had to design their weapons to work in any condition that they could fight in.
Right. That's a necessity at that point. They had to. There was no choice.
Yeah, so they couldn't furnish their army with guns that didn't work in the cold because it's where the fuck else are we going to fight?
Right.
This is fucking Russia. So the Germans came in and some of their one of the biggest, and also their tanks. The Russian tanks were designed to be able to function in the extreme cold. the German tanks, some of them literally froze in their tracks and just turned into giant metal death traps for the soldiers inside of them. Yeah, and one of the, like, Germans they were really big, especially Hitler. At the time, with his model of the army, he was big on using the tanks to enforce the blitzkrieg.
So that's a huge part of his strategy.
Yeah.
Just defeated right there.
Yeah. Not without firing a single shot. Like, that's the biggest thing about why the cold is such a factor.
Wow.
And all of these Russian invasions, like, they don't have to do anything other than last long enough to make it to winter.
Which they already planned on lasting in that exact part of the region of the world anyway, so...
Like, yeah. Literally, like... And also, I mean, just think about it. Like, the further you get into Russia, keeping an army supplied...
Right.
Especially,
and it's just getting harder and harder.
Because, like I said, they burn everything behind them. There's nothing there.
Wow. That's crazy. They were defeated by climate.
Yeah.
Essentially. And then the whole course of history has been influenced ever since.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Weather, man.
Well, not just switch it up, but whenever we were talking about the honey badger, this is a question I was looking at last night. So if a turtle loses its shell, is it homeless or naked?
Okay.
Naked and afraid.
I would say personally, if the turtle found its shell over the course of its life and then lost it, it would be homeless. But if it's born with that shell, that's a naked motherfucker.
I like that. I guess in a way it's naked and homeless too.
Dude,
at
that
the same
sucks.
time, simultaneously.
God damn. Fuck.
Yeah, I was looking up like hypothetical questions, and that one came across. And I thought it was hilarious. Well, earlier you were talking about binary logic, and you said you do not agree with binary logic. Which there was somebody. So my buddy, I had him on yesterday for episode number I think it was 42 or something. Yeah, it was 42. And he's an EMT driver, right? So he like sits in the back of ambulances or drives ambulances around. And he said that the test for EMT, what it does is it's either a pass or fail, and they don't tell you what you get. Like, so it's completely binary. Like, it's either you make it or you don't, and you don't get a score. It's yes or no to get accepted into EMT school. So I would not agree with that at all.
Well, I mean, like, it's so many cases in our society. Like, things are simplified into one outcome or the other. And I don't really get, or I guess I could say I get it because it's the simplest possible way to imagine like multivariable situation is with only two variables.
Right.
But that doesn't, in my mind, that isn't a fitting description of or perspective on our reality because, like, so when you look at it, like, have you looked into, like, quantum computing at all?
I have not, no.
Okay, so, like, the way computers are written now, like, right now, is at their base coding is what's called binary code, which is a 1 or a 0, which basically, what that communicates, like, how the computer reads that is whether to turn on or off a certain circuit in a certain location. That's a lot.
This is off topic, but there's a lot of backing to the simulation theory because of binary code. Apparently, it's been found at like the heart of physics, just all ones and zeros. But anyway.
Well, and so
that's crazy.
Going into that, the thing is like in the quantum world, like in the physical world, we can observe that kind of happening. Like, you know, a TV, it's on or it's off. You know, like we've created, honestly, like things that satisfy the state of on or off or 1 or 0.
Or yes or no.
Exactly. But like, and why quantum computing, if you've ever heard it talked about, why it's like such a buzz thing in science, a big deal. So ultimately, at the base level of our computing, there is the limitation right now of binary code that you can only tell a computer to do this or that. That's it. Like, you can come up with all these other crazy things to base off of it, but at the base level, it's this or that. Just taking an example of a biological system, our genetic code does not work that way. It is a 4-variable system. Okay. And while, so like it's A, C's, T's, and G's.
Right, okay, I remember that from biology.
Like, it's one of 4 things at all times. Now, mind you, once you pick one, like, my genetics professor would kill me right now, but, like, I can't remember which... one bonds only with... Basically, they bond in pairs. So, like, I think it's... Is it A's and G's and C's and T's? I don't know. You can look it up if you want. But, like, my point is...
I think it's AG... I think the T's are... Yeah, I'll look it up.
But, like, my point is... At fundamental levels, when you look at nature, it doesn't work that way.
It's ACGT.
Okay.
And that's for DNA encoding. So does that mean there are 16 possibilities or like if there are 4, then I guess combinations?
Well, so think about it like a line of like. So, in any single space in the genetic code. So like, mind if I borrow your notebook to draw a little demonstration? So like. Say we have a line of genetic code here. Because there are 2, like our DNA is double-stranded, so it has 2 sides.
Right.
And then we have, say, a line of computer code. Doesn't have a corresponding side, but for all intents and principles, think about it like one side of a genetic code.
Okay.
You can have a 0, 1, or that's it, in any of these spaces. You know, you only have 2 variables that you can plug in.
Okay.
In any of these spaces, you can put A, C, G, T. You can put any of those 4. So in any given space of data, you have 4 possible options for how to encode that data in DNA. Okay. In binary coding, you only have 2 ways. So think about it like in binary code, you have this, that. In like DNA, for example, what's considered by many to be a natural computer language, you have this, that, the other, and something else. Okay, you can fill one data point with 4 different options instead of 2, which allows for a lot more possibilities in terms of what you can create.
Absolutely.
So in quantum computing, going off of that, when you look at like fundamental particles, the number of states they can occupy greatly changes. Like there are some models of physics where like the smallest, most fundamental particles to our universe have almost infinite outcomes for what they can become. So think about a computing system based on, instead of this or that at one data point, you have like 26 different things you can put into that one data point. And think about how much more...
The realm of possibility.
Yes.
Wow.
Like, that's one of the things that's going to make AI a lot more realistic. Like, and I don't mean like something we've programmed to like have response. I mean something that is probably honestly going to surpass us in the next 100 years.
Oh, absolutely.
Like quantum computing is like how the robot future happens.
So is it possible that there could be infinite variables? If you can go all the way up to 26, you said 26, right?
Yeah.
Is it possible that it could go to infinite or to 100 or?
Well, that's the thing we're trying to figure out right now is like, because I mean, you know, we understand binary circuits. Like that's just a basic electrical circuit. Is this on or off? Are we going to like have to put something in between so that the current doesn't flow here? We understand that. So that's why it's fairly easy for us to extrapolate all this stuff using binary coding, binary logic systems.
Okay.
But we don't understand the quantum world fully yet. We've learned a lot about it over the past 100 years, but I mean, to a certain degree, we just don't have the technology to fully understand all of what happens. Like there's this... So teleportation, like the theories for how to do teleportation have been worked out. Like the problem is in any real fashion, like doable fashion. It would be almost impossible just because of the limitations of our technology. Like, but what it essentially is how you get it to work is why information in our universe doesn't travel at an instant speed to a certain degree has to do with the fact that all of the particles that make us up have a slight, like every single one of them have just a very slight difference in their spin axis, how they rotate.
Okay.
And there's this thing called and that basically that makes it so the information that is us doesn't have the ability to just move instantly throughout space easily. Because think about it like trying to float. You're trying to flow with a river, but you've got bricks for shoes. Like you're being slowed down. You're being slowed down. Basically, is the simplest way to think about it. You have something forcing you to, like, weighting you against the current, just kind of resisting it without even doing anything, just by nature of what it is.
Totally.
If you perfectly align all of those particles' axes and you get them into this state called quantum coherence, the information can move at basically the speed of light. Like, you can move instantaneously. The thing is, so say you put a person into quantum coherence and transmit that data to a receiver, like basically the end, like say this is a teleporter we're talking about here, the teleporter puts the person into quantum coherence. The question is, does it just transfer that information, and what you get is a new person that's just been basically reconstructed at that point in space to be a perfect carbon copy of the person that you had? Like,
is that person?
Are you destroyed? Like, when your body basically loses its form, because, I mean, that's kind of what happens, is your body is losing its corporeal form and transforming into raw data.
Right.
Like...
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Like, is that person that comes out on the other end you, or just a read of that data?
Do you think the answer would lie within memories? Like, would you hold the same memories? Or?
Well, that's the problem, is memories are, to a certain degree, physical structures in our brains.
So virtually what we're doing, what you're talking about is that teleportation would be, let's say you're over in France right now.
Yeah.
And then you step into this machine or whatever, and then you're pretty much 3D printing yourself in, like, another country or wherever.
Basically, yeah.
Wow.
Well, like, that's the question, is like, are you actually being transmitted between those 2 points? Like, is that you? Or does it read all of the information from your body, transmit it instantly, and then just give you, what you would get by compiling all of that data? And the thing is, like, you can't test that to a certain... Like, this is where, like, we don't even know how to begin to have the technology to test that, because you asked, like, can we test by memory? There are a lot of theories, leading theories right now in neuroscience that dictate that our brain, like the memories, our emotions, are very heavily tied to physical structuring in our brains. So if you produce an exact replica of someone's brain, like basically, when you transfer that data, if you perfectly reproduce their nervous system, they'll have those memories whether or not they're that person.
Wow.
Yeah, like that's one of the big, like, there's like a debate among physicists right now whether or not you can digitize consciousness. And one of the biggest questions is, it seems like all of this is tied physically to the brain. How do we account for that? Like, do we have to do that? Do we have to physically take your brain out? Like, can we separate you from your body? Is that even possible? And like, going off of that, like, to give you an idea, I mean, like, that's why, like, we were talking a little earlier before we started filming about, like, how recovering from depression and PTSD, like, the things that have been shown to be effective are things that actually force you to form new neural connections, because those are physical phenomenon in your brain.
Right.
Like, those are physically formed neural connections that are making your brain process emotions a certain way or connect things to a certain memory.
So are those same neural pathways and the same chemical, biological makeup that you have in your mind, is that going to be recreated just identical? And then, you're right, is that the same person?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Like, for real. That's like one of the biggest questions. Like, Because, I mean, right now we actually are experimenting with this with, like, individual atoms, and there's, like, the question right now, like, is that just a perfect copy of this atom, or is this that actual atom? And we don't know.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, obviously I can't wrap my head around it. These people talking about this are a lot smarter than myself.
Dude, like...
Wow, that's insane.
Like, I don't think... Here's the thing about, like, really high-level science, and this is how I figured out who I listen to, is, like, anyone that's super authoritative, like, I know this is true, I kind of throw out as bullshit. Anyone who's like, listen, this is the leading theory, and there's totally a chance this could not be true, but this is what we believe right now. But tomorrow that could change. Because that's what a scientist really is. Like,
more of an open book versus somebody who has their own ego tied to, like, their work, their science, their theory.
Well, and that's why I think a lot of people, like, the people in mainstream society that do have problems with science, like, one of their, like, sometimes a lot of people's biggest complaints will be, like, a common example in the nutrition world, they'll be like, oh, you know, they said this was healthy just a couple years ago, now it's terrible for you, da-da-da-da-da, like, well, and that's the thing about science. That's the problem with taking science as though it's a Bible. Like, you know, because whatever you want to say about religion or whatever, like, the Bible hasn't really been altered much. Like, so that's just kind of like, that's what I mean by that example is like,
no, I know what you mean.
You know,
like a set part of law.
Science isn't a set doctrine. Science is basically a group consensus that from everything we've studied across the world and everything we've seen so far, this is what we together think makes up our understanding of the truth right now.
True.
But the thing is, like, when you, like, necessarily for that to continue to grow and develop, you have to have the mindset that, like, this could change tomorrow. Because, I mean...
It requires open-mindedness with that curiosity for science.
Yeah, exactly.
Of the physical and natural world. Wow.
And, like, that's why a lot of people have freaking problems, is they're just, like, they keep changing their minds. It's like, yeah, because we keep everything is going to change as we continue to learn things. And there are going to be times where science comes full circle and we're like, oh, this was stupid, we've moved past this, and then we're just like, oh, wait, this is actually a good idea again. Like, there are going to be times where we think something's a great idea and just full on move past it. Like, all sorts of possibilities.
So I'm writing down all these topics for later. But in science is extremely open to interpretation and extremely theoretical, and that's what I didn't realize until, like, one of my buddies laid it out for me one night. We were hanging out at his house, and I was like, so that's the correct way, right? And he's like, you know, like, all science is just theoretical, right? Like, it's like the Big Bang Theory. That's just a theory. Mm-hmm. You don't know for sure if that's actually what happened. That's just the universally accepted theory.
Yeah,
that's all it is. It's a fucking theory.
Well, and, like, that's the thing, like, any good scientist will tell you. And, like, the reason scientists will, like, get pissed that they don't teach, like, evolution in schools is just the fact that it's not, like, okay, things like evolution can, to a certain degree, like, they contradict certain people's belief structures. But I don't think, like, science is very much about, like, you can't live in this world where your ideas are insulated, otherwise they're not going to keep up.
I love that.
I mean, like, that's the thing you get from studying biology, from studying chemistry, from studying physics. Like, the nature of the world around us, everything is change. That is the driving force of everything, like, is just fucking change. Like, we are... If you want to think about it this way, we are a chemical reaction that just keeps on continuing itself. And the thing, if you ever notice about chemical reactions, is as conditions change, as you introduce new chemical elements, everything, the reaction changes.
Right.
Like, that's why we have evolved over years, is that we were a system designed to change as things come in. And, like, that's what really sometimes gets on my nerves about people being against science being taught, is that scientists, like, okay, yeah, there's some people that are dickheads about it, and they're like, you should teach this like it's law, but like most good scientists are going to say, like, listen, I don't think like you have to believe this is the ultimate end-all be-all truth of reality, because it could change tomorrow.
Totally.
But that doesn't mean you should insulate yourself from ideas that contradict you when there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that it's probably true. If you want to say, like, maybe they should throw in other competing, validated by evidence theories, yes. But, like, the thing is, like, you know, it's a science class. Let them teach science.
Exactly, yeah.
Like science...
With no restraints.
Yeah, like, science isn't about offending people's belief structures. It's just about learning how to question the reality around you and test those questions to find meaningful answers. And half the time, yes, those meaningful answers are going to be just more meaningful questions.
True. Yeah, just like you were saying, like, we've made it so far into quantum mechanics, but, like, it leaves us with so, like, it makes us realize how little we know, and, like, once we figure that next problem out, it's probably going to lead us to how little we know again.
Well, I mean, to, like, give you a concept of, like, how mind-fucky physics has gotten. So I was watching a video on this the other day, this effect called the quantum eraser.
Quantum eraser, okay.
Yeah, so there's this thing called the double-slit experiment.
I'm writing it down.
You'll like it. But basically, it talks about how...
What was the eraser?
The quantum eraser, and then it's based off of this thing called the double-slit experiment, which is one of the most famous experiments in all of particle physics.
I think I've heard of that before.
Yeah, so as I describe it, you'll probably be like, oh, yeah.
Okay.
So...
And we're live with Joel Geders, which is... This episode is a continuation of the last episode, number 44.
I'm back, motherfuckers.
So we left on the quantum eraser, and you were going to explain the double slit.
Okay, so...